In my last video, I discussed what I called left-wing maths, where objective truth doesn't apply in the computation of figures with the left-wing ideological mindset. Of course, it's a given that there is no absolute truth or even objective truth. I'm talking about a curious phenomenon that I call left-wing facts, a curious parallel universe where facts just pop in and out of existence according to the whims of leftist ideology. Now, of course, it's a given that left-wingers don't actually believe in objective truth. Truth is simply a case of what is true for me right now is the truth. It all comes down to the social revolution in the Western world of secular humanist relativism, of total personal freedom, which I sum up with the formula self-expression, self-indulgence, and self-importance. And in a biblical religious sense, man making himself God in the place of God. Politically, this is pitted against a mindset of conservative values, not what I would describe as conservative political ideology, because I don't think that's really what a true conservative is all about. Conservatives can change the world through their values, enduring values, but leftist ideology is all about fundamentally changing human nature through philosophical theorising. This is best left in the realm of religion, which left-wing political ideology seeks to emulate by, in effect, operating as a quasi-religious cult. Left-wingers have perfect freedom. The problem is people aren't smart enough to create a just world, and left-wingers unerringly, inevitably wind up doing everything which they hypocritically accuse other people of doing, which condemns them to pretty much replicating the very ills that they diagnose in the world. For example, back in the 1920s, following the First World War, they created a League of Nations. The implicit notion here was that a supranational world organisation would go about policing the world and stopping nations from going to war through the application of military force. I detect a certain paradox here, and all this coincided with the imbecilic Kellogg-Briand Pact in, I think, 1924, which outlawed war. Great idea, that. So who is going to enforce the outlawing of these wars? Who is going to police that? Another military force going to war. Back in the 60s, there was a movie character called Billy Jack. I came across some advertising for these movies, and I can't remember the exact depiction of this Billy Jack, but I always remember it as something along the lines of this skull-cracking, gut-wrenching messenger of peace. The set-piece characterisation was of a man who had been a hero in warfare and had become a pacifist, but was now breaking people's skulls to enforce peace and non-violence. Straight from the Kellogg-Briand School of Social Justice. And of course, not to forget our old friend Edmund Burke. The only thing necessary for evil to prevail is that good men do nothing. To which I respond, good Nazis, good communists, good Scientologists, good practitioners of the Spanish Inquisition, all making the world a perfect pure place according to their ideology. Great formula for peace, that one. Of course, Jesus Christ said, call no man good. He didn't even include himself in that formulation, and routinely portrayed humans as hopelessly evil, all of them. And as the Old Testament says, they have war in their members, and the way of peace they know not. So war is always bad, and we should never go to war, except when we should. Now, the classic set piece of this notion can be found in the crusade for women's equality, because the fact is women are intrinsically equal to men, but women and men have all been brainwashed into thinking that they're inferior. Now, of course, when this social justice crusade fails to produce the goods, they now resort to a program of affirmative action, which implies discriminating against men, sexism, and the logic goes that when people see women in positions of power, it will overcome the artificial prejudice people have, and the equal participation of women in society will become a self-generating fact. Now, this doesn't actually work. Men still run the world, assisted by an increasing number of women promoted above their level of competency to create the illusion that women are intrinsically equal to men through artificial means. They are equal to men to the extent that men will oversee a system of affirmative action merely creates the illusion of equality. So prior to the 2020 election, Biden declares that he will nominate a black woman for the Supreme Court even before he is elected. So if a conservative comes along and said, "You have not chosen the best candidate for this office, you are guilty of, by your own definition, an act of sexism and racism," that's being a right-wing so-and-so to take that view. So they take the affirmative action, which logically implies not picking the best candidate for the job, and make it seem like it's two different things, whereas it is one fact. In denying the moral import of one aspect of this fact, you're denying the original fact. Now, this all creates an amazing disconnect where feminists perpetuate this bogus philosophy where you get a deep-seated conflict between people who are arguing over the same fact. This book is blue. No. This book is blue. Don't you get it? So, women are promoted in preference to men through a principle of discrimination, which is the very thing they're opposed to. Having men help women into positions of power, which implies that women are unequal, which is the position that you're fighting against. So you employ that thing you're fighting against. And according to your bogus philosophy, this is the wonderful, ideologically pure program of affirmative action to artificially promote women. But when some evil right-wing so-and-so comes along and says you are practicing affirmative action, the reaction is, we are certainly not, because this fact becomes their affirmative action, not your affirmative action. So it's kind of like the way you say it. To put it another way, it's fine to talk about affirmative action for women when you're with a group of like-minded left-wing ideologues. But if there's a right-winger around, let's just stay mum about all that and circle the ideological wagons. Anything to paper over the ideological cracks. Here's another classic. The AIDS epidemic is a disease of homosexuals. How dare you make such a homophobic assertion? The fact that AIDS afflicts homosexuals in far greater numbers than the general population, as does the recent monkeypox outbreak, is simply an unjustifiable slur against homosexuals. But now, homosexual activists will turn around and demand from the government special measures to protect homosexuals against AIDS, and how homophobic of them not to factor in that AIDS afflicts homosexuals more than it does the general public. So that fact is a good fact if you're a left-wing activist, but a bad fact if you're a right-wing so-and-so. And then there's bias at the ABC. I would say to the elitists at the ABC, aren't you proud to be combating right-wing conservatism wherever you find it? Yes, at a dinner party surrounded by all their left-wing mates, there's not the slightest concession to right-wing conservatism there. But when they're sitting at the desk at the ABC, they become very conciliatory all of a sudden to other people's perspectives and points of view. So the fact of being an idealistic left-wing crusader against the absolute evil of conservatism disappears in a puff of smoke. Well, aren't you proud to be a crusader for social justice? What happened to that fact? Now, it's a fact when I want it to be a fact, that it's not a fact when somebody else wants it to be a fact. They heroically declare that they're going to do something, but when they get caught out over it by those who can see through what they're doing, they deny the thing they publicly declared that they were trying to do. This is all so much like the story of the schoolboy who breaks the window. Well, the window's not broken. Well, if it's broken, I didn't do it. Well, if I did it, it was an accident. The whole point about this is that, like all of us, left-wingers are stuck in a world of reality where the concrete, factual reality of things always trumps their bogus political ideology and supposed moral and intellectual superiority to the rest of us peons. They cannot create their perfect world with their puristic ideology, but they do what they can, and they just crash headlong into the real world that refuses to change according to their sham social consciousness. So they do what their ideology always demands and always starts with, which is to say, simply interpreting the world in a way that suits the demands of their personal existential condition of helplessness. They create a parallel universe where concrete facts will just change to suit the demands of their political ideology and the shifting priorities of their personal quest for self-realization in a world that refuses to conform. That's all for now.